I used to think the hardest part of love was holding on. Now I understand the hardest part is realizing you were never really holding anything at all. There are ordinary things in my life that still look the same on the surface. The same kitchen light. The same familiar sound of a key turning in a lock. The same quiet space at the end of the day where someone is supposed to be. But none of it feels the way it used to. It's strange how something can be taken from you without anyone breaking in, without anyone raising their voice, without a dramatic moment you can point to and say, that was it. For me, it was more like waking up in a house that hadn't moved, but somehow wasn't home anymore. I didn't lose my relationship all at once. I lost it in pieces, without realizing they were missing. And even now, when I look back, I can't stop thinking about how easily someone can disappear while standing right beside you. I still catch myself reaching for routines that don't exist anymore. The small, thoughtless habits you build with another person. The kind you don't even notice until they're gone. There was a time when I believed I knew where I belonged. I believed I knew who I was to her. That certainty doesn't come back once it's broken. It doesn't matter how much you want it to. Because once you see what trust really is, how fragile it is, you start to realize it was never a guarantee. It was just an agreement you assumed you were both keeping. The worst part is that I didn't find out through some huge confession or a confrontation that finally brought the truth into the open. It wasn't like that. It started with something small. Something stupid, honestly. The kind of thing that shouldn't matter. I remember standing in the middle of an ordinary day, sorting through a pile of things we'd been meaning to deal with. Papers. Old envelopes. The kind of clutter you tell yourself you'll organize someday. It felt almost peaceful. Boring, even. And then I saw something that didn't belong. At first, my brain tried to place it somewhere harmless. A mistake. A leftover document. Something unrelated. That's what you do when your life has been stable for a long time. You protect it. You explain things away before you even understand them. I stared at it longer than I should have. My first instinct wasn't panic. It was confusion. I remember thinking, why would this be here? And then, slowly, the discomfort arrived. Not fear yet. Just a tightness. Like a warning your body gives you before your mind catches up. There was no proof in that moment. Not really. Just a feeling. A wrongness I couldn't immediately name. I tried to ignore it. I actually put it back down at first, like if I didn't touch it, it couldn't touch me. But once you notice something, you can't unnotice it. It sits in the corner of your mind and changes the shape of everything else. Suddenly, the quiet parts of your life don't feel quiet anymore. They feel empty. I started replaying little moments I'd never questioned before. A distracted look. A rushed goodbye. A phone turned slightly away. Nothing dramatic. Nothing I could accuse someone of. Just, small gaps. And the problem with gaps is that your mind wants to fill them. I didn't want to become suspicious. I didn't want to be that person. The one who searches for reasons to doubt. But I also couldn't go back to how I felt 5 minutes earlier. Something had shifted. I didn't know what it meant yet. I only knew that whatever I had found wasn't supposed to exist in the life I thought I was living. And once that thought took root, I realized I was already standing at the edge of something I couldn't step away from. When I think about how we started, nothing about it feels dramatic. That's probably why I trusted it. We met through mutual friends. No lightning strike. No big moment. Just steady conversation that stretched longer than either of us expected. She had this calm way of listening that made you feel like you weren't competing with the rest of the world for her attention. I remember telling a friend, "It's easy with her." That was the word I used. Easy. We built everything slowly. Dinners at home instead of crowded restaurants. Weekends spent doing small errands together like they were events. Grocery shopping. Rearranging furniture. Talking about work over coffee. It didn't feel intense. It felt stable. And stability can be addictive. She was practical. Organized. The kind of person who made lists and followed through on them. I admired that. I was more impulsive. She liked that about me, or at least she said she did. You keep things interesting, she once told me, smiling. I think I liked the balance we created. I felt grounded around her. As time passed, our lives blended the way they're supposed to. Her books on my shelf. My shoes by the door. Shared passwords. Shared plans. Conversations about where we'd be in 5 years. We didn't rush into anything, but we didn't hesitate either. When we decided to combine finances, it felt like a milestone. Responsible. Mature. It just makes sense, she said when we signed the paperwork. We're building something together. I believed that completely. We split responsibilities without really talking about it. She handled most of the bills. I handled repairs and bigger purchases. It wasn't rigid. It just worked. At least, that's how it felt. Looking back, I realize I leaned into that system more than I thought. I didn't double-check statements often. I didn't question transfers or charges unless something was obviously wrong. It wasn't neglect. It was trust. We weren't the kind of couple that fought loudly. If there was tension, it usually showed up as distance. A quiet evening. A short answer. A long day explanation. And most of the time, that was enough. She valued independence. I respected that. We didn't track each other's schedules. If she said she was working late or meeting someone, I took her at her word. Why wouldn't I? There's a point in a relationship where asking too many questions feels insulting. Like you're poking holes in something that's supposed to be solid. I never wanted to be the person who doubted without reason. We talked about the future in practical terms. Saving for a larger place. Traveling somewhere warm one winter. Maybe even starting a small business together someday. Nothing extravagant. Just forward. There was comfort in believing that the person beside you was walking in the same direction. Friends would comment on how steady we seemed. That word again. Steady. I wore it like a badge. If there were moments when she seemed distracted, I assumed it was stress. Work had been demanding for her. She carried it quietly, which I interpreted as strength. Sometimes I'd ask, "You okay?" She'd nod. "Yeah. Just tired." And that would be it. I never pressed. Not because I didn't care. But because I trusted that if something mattered, she would tell me. That was the foundation everything else rested on, the belief that what was important would be shared. I didn't realize how much of myself I had wrapped into that belief. My routines, my financial decisions, even my sense of security were tied to the idea that we were operating as a single unit. 2 people, 1 life. That's how I saw it. I didn't consider the possibility that someone could build something parallel without dismantling what was already there. To me, commitment meant exclusivity in every sense: time, money, loyalty, attention. I never thought to define it out loud. I just assumed we agreed. And that assumption is what made the first crack feel so impossible to name. As the years went on, the relationship stopped feeling like something we were building and started feeling like something permanent. We stopped saying if and started saying when. When we move somewhere bigger. When things settle down at work. When we finally take that long trip we always talk about. There was an ease to planning a future with someone who seemed certain. She didn't hesitate when we talked about long-term things. If anything, she was the one pushing for structure. We should think ahead, she'd say. It's better to be prepared. So we prepared. We merged more than just a bank account. We merged routines. Bills came out automatically. Savings were allocated without much discussion. We had shared goals written down somewhere, though we rarely needed to look at them. I started to rely on her steadiness. If something financial came up, I'd ask, "Are we okay?" She'd answer quickly, "We're fine." And I believed her. There's a subtle shift that happens when you trust someone with the details of your life. You stop monitoring. Not out of laziness. Out of confidence. I didn't feel the need to check every transaction or question every schedule change. It would have felt unnecessary. Almost paranoid. We both worked demanding jobs, and our time apart increased naturally. Some evenings she'd stay late. Other nights I would. We'd text updates. Running behind. Home soon. Don't wait up. It felt normal. If she guarded her phone more than she used to, I chalked it up to privacy. Everyone deserves some. If she stepped into another room to take a call, I assumed it was work. Once, I joked about it. "You're mysterious lately." She smiled without looking up. "I'm really not." And that was enough. I trusted the version of her I saw every day. The one who made coffee in the morning. The one who asked about my meetings. The one who leaned against me on the couch while half watching something neither of us really cared about. Those small moments anchor you. They make everything else feel secure. I didn't notice that I had started measuring my stability by her presence. If she seemed calm, I felt calm. If she seemed distant, I told myself I was overthinking. I didn't want to be the insecure one. There were times I considered asking deeper questions. Not accusations. Just curiosity. But I'd stop myself. If there was nothing wrong, I'd be creating tension where none existed. And if there was something wrong, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. It's uncomfortable admitting that now. But I had tied my sense of safety to the idea that we were aligned. That whatever challenges existed, we were facing them together. I didn't realize that dependency doesn't always look dramatic. It can look like trust. Like routine. Like not needing to look too closely because you're sure the foundation is solid. Looking back, I can see how easily I handed over the small checkpoints. The casual verifications. The just-in-case conversations. I told myself that's what healthy relationships required: space, confidence, no suspicion. What I didn't consider was how easy it is for two lives to share a surface and still run on separate tracks underneath. The first real shift didn't feel dramatic. It felt inconvenient. She started coming home later than usual. Not every night. Just often enough that I noticed the pattern. When I'd ask how her day was, the answers got shorter. Busy. Long. You wouldn't believe it. And I wouldn't push. At first, I told myself this is what adulthood looks like. People get tired. Work gets heavier. Energy dips. But something in the rhythm changed. She used to tell me small, pointless details about her day. Who annoyed her. What she had for lunch. A random thought she had during a meeting. Those things faded. Conversations became summaries instead of stories. One night I asked, "Everything okay?" She didn't look up from her phone. Yeah. Why wouldn't it be? That question stayed with me longer than it should have. There were other small things. Her phone started living face down on the counter. Notifications muted. If I walked into a room while she was texting, the screen would tilt away without her seeming to think about it. Not dramatically. Just subtly. Enough to register. I remember standing in the kitchen one evening, watching her laugh quietly at something on her screen. When I asked what was funny, she hesitated. Just something stupid. She didn't show me. It wasn't that she had to. It was the pause before the answer that stuck. Still, none of it was proof of anything. If I'd told someone else, they probably would have said I was reading too much into normal behavior. So I kept it to myself. The schedule changes increased. Working late became a regular phrase. Sometimes she'd say she was meeting someone about a project. Other times she wouldn't explain at all. I started noticing how often she showered the second she got home. Not always. Just more than before. These are ridiculous details to list out now. But when you're inside it, the mind collects them like puzzle pieces you're afraid to assemble. I questioned myself more than I questioned her. Maybe I was bored. Maybe I was projecting. Maybe I was insecure about something I hadn't admitted yet. I told myself I trusted her. And I did. That was the problem. Then came the day I was cleaning out a stack of old paperwork we'd both been ignoring. Mail we'd shoved into a drawer. Receipts. Statements. It wasn't dramatic. I was just trying to be productive. That's when I found something that didn't fit. A document with her name on it. Recent. Formal. Attached to an address I didn't recognize. At first, I assumed it was outdated. Something temporary. A mistake. I checked the date again. It was current. I stared at it long enough that the room started to feel smaller. There are moments when your brain protects you. It offers you softer explanations before it allows the sharp ones. Maybe it was for work. Maybe it was an investment. Maybe she forgot to mention it. I almost put it back in the drawer. I actually told myself, ask her later. But my hands didn't move. Instead, I flipped through the pages. My eyes scanning for context, for something that would make it harmless. What I found instead was confirmation that this wasn't old. This wasn't theoretical. It was active. And then something colder hit me. Payments listed. Numbers that looked familiar. I went to check our account history. At that point, I still wasn't sure what I was looking for. I just needed reassurance. Scrolling through the transactions felt surreal. Ordinary charges. Utilities. Groceries. And then transfers. Consistent. Structured. Going somewhere I had never heard of. I remember thinking, there has to be a reason. I checked the dates again. Compared them to the document in my hand. They lined up too cleanly. My chest felt tight, but I still wasn't ready to call it what it was. There's a thin line between suspicion and accusation. Once you cross it, you can't pretend you didn't. I sat there for a long time, staring at information that shouldn't have existed in my version of our life. I told myself I would ask her directly. But another thought crept in. If this was innocent, I'd look paranoid. If it wasn't, I wasn't sure I wanted to see the rest. And that was the moment I realized I was already afraid of the answer. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay there listening to the quiet sounds of the house, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. That there was some explanation I hadn't thought of yet. Something practical. Something boring. But the document was still in my mind like a weight. So was the address. By morning, my body felt heavy, like it already knew what my brain was still refusing to accept. I waited until she left. She kissed me quickly on the way out, the way you do when you're running late. Her hand brushed my shoulder like it was automatic. "See you later," she said. "Yeah," I answered. And the door closed. For a while, I just stood there. Then I found myself in the car, typing the address into my phone with hands that didn't feel like mine. The drive was quiet. Too quiet. Every stoplight felt surreal, like the world was functioning normally while something inside me was coming apart. I kept thinking, I'm just checking. That's all. I'll see it's nothing, and I'll come home ashamed of myself. That was the story I wanted. When I pulled up, the building didn't look dramatic. It wasn't some hidden mansion or a dark alley. It was just a place. That somehow made it worse. Because it meant this wasn't fantasy. It was real life. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the entrance. My heart was pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. I almost left. I almost told myself it was none of my business, that I should just talk to her instead. But I couldn't unsee what I'd found. I couldn't unknow the payments. Eventually, I forced myself out of the car and walked inside. My legs felt unsteady. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip them together while I waited at the buzzer. I pressed the number listed on the paperwork. A pause. Then a voice came through, slightly distorted. Yeah. I didn't answer right away. My mouth was dry. I'm looking for, I stopped. I didn't even know what I was looking for. The door clicked. I don't know why I went up. I don't know why my body kept moving when my mind was screaming to stop. I stood outside the unit, staring at the door like it might explain itself. Then I knocked. It opened after a moment. A woman stood there. Not the woman I expected. She looked at me with confusion first, then something sharper. Yes? I couldn't speak. I think I was trying to understand the scene before I understood the words. I'm sorry, I managed. Is this? Her expression shifted. Annoyance, like I was an interruption. Who are you? That was the first time it hit me that I didn't belong there. That I was the outsider. I swallowed. I'm looking for someone. Her eyes narrowed. She's not here. The way she said she made my stomach drop. I tried to keep my voice steady. She lives here? The woman hesitated, just long enough. Then, with a kind of resigned irritation, she opened the door wider, as if to prove something. And I saw it. Not empty. Not temporary. Lived in. A coat hanging by the entrance. Shoes placed neatly on a mat. A scent in the air that was familiar in a way I couldn't explain. My eyes moved automatically, scanning like I was searching for a reason to be wrong. There were groceries on the counter. A half-used bottle of something in the kitchen. A throw blanket folded on the couch. This wasn't a place someone visited. This was a place someone existed. My throat tightened. I think there's been a mistake, I whispered, even though I could already feel the truth pressing in. The woman gave me a look like she didn't believe in mistakes. Then I saw a framed photo on a shelf. I didn't walk toward it. I didn't have to. I recognized her immediately. My wife. Smiling. Not the polite smile she gave strangers. Not the tired smile she gave me some evenings. A real smile. And beside her, someone else. A man, close enough that there was no question what kind of closeness it was. My vision blurred. I felt lightheaded, like the floor had shifted. I heard myself breathe, sharp and uneven. The woman watched me, her face hard. You didn't know, she said, not as a question. I couldn't answer. Because what could I say? That I thought I knew my own life? That I thought I was standing in the center of it? My mouth opened, but nothing came out. The woman's tone softened slightly, but only slightly. Look, you should go. I nodded, because I couldn't do anything else. I stepped backward, out of the doorway, out of that reality, but it followed me anyway. The hallway felt too bright. The air felt wrong. By the time I reached my car, my hands were numb. I sat behind the wheel and stared straight ahead. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, trying to understand how something like this could exist alongside the life I came home to every night. She hadn't just been unfaithful. She had been maintaining something. A separate world. A version of herself that didn't include me at all. Driving home was worse than arriving. Because I kept imagining her walking through our front door later, acting normal. Asking about my day. Sitting beside me like nothing was fractured. And the scariest part wasn't the idea of losing her. It was realizing how easily she could vanish while still being right next to me. Like I had been living beside a stranger, and I was the last one to find out. I don't remember much about what I did when I got home. I know I sat down. I know I stared at the wall for a long time, like if I stayed still enough, the reality might rearrange itself into something else. But it didn't. The house looked the same. That was the cruel part. Everything was exactly where it had always been. The life I thought I had was still staged around me. I kept expecting her to walk in and for this to turn into some misunderstanding. Some explanation that made me feel foolish. Instead, hours passed. When I heard the key in the door, my body tensed so hard it almost hurt. She stepped inside like she always did. She set her bag down. Kicked her shoes off. "Hey," she said casually. I didn't respond right away. She glanced up. "You okay?" I think she heard something in the silence. I stood slowly, my legs still feeling unsteady. "I went to the address," I said. The words came out flat. Almost calm. Her face changed, but only for a second. A flicker of something behind her eyes. "What address?" she asked. I stared at her. That was the first time I felt something beyond shock. Something sharper. I didn't raise my voice. I couldn't. My throat felt too tight. "The place you've been paying for," I said. "With our money." She blinked, like she was calculating. Then she exhaled and looked away. "I didn't want you to find out like that." That sentence was like a door closing. Not denial. Not confusion. Just confirmation. I felt my hands curl into fists without meaning to. "So it's real," I said quietly. She didn't answer immediately. She walked past me toward the kitchen, like distance could soften what was happening. "It's complicated," she said. I let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "It didn't look complicated," I replied. "It looked lived in." Her shoulders stiffened. "I didn't plan for it to become this," she said. I turned toward her. "Become what?" She finally looked at me, and her expression wasn't guilt the way I expected. It was tired. Defensive. "I didn't know how to stop," she said. That was when something inside me broke further. Not because of the words themselves, but because of what they implied. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice repeated over and over. "How long?" I asked. She hesitated. I nodded slowly, already understanding what hesitation meant. "A while," she said. "A while." As if time could be rounded down when it was inconvenient. I swallowed hard. "And you were just coming home here after?" She didn't answer directly. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said instead. That made my stomach turn. Because it wasn't about wanting. It was about doing. I stepped back, shaking my head. "You had a whole other life," I said. My voice cracked slightly. "Do you understand how insane that feels?" She pressed her lips together. "I felt trapped," she said. I stared at her, trying to process the word. Trapped. As if I had been holding her hostage with trust. "You could have left," I said. "You could have just left." She looked down. "I didn't want to lose everything," she murmured. And there it was. Not love. Not confusion. Convenience. The room felt smaller with every breath. I realized I didn't even know what I was fighting for in that moment. There was nothing to salvage from a life that had been divided without my consent. I didn't tell her to get out. I didn't pack a bag right then. I just stood there, staring at the person I thought I knew, realizing that whatever we had, it had been ending long before today. And I was only now catching up to the truth. The days after that didn't feel real. They felt like walking through a place I recognized, but with the understanding that none of it was mine anymore. We didn't have some dramatic final blowout. There was no single moment where everything wrapped up cleanly. It was messier than that. Quieter. We moved around each other like strangers sharing a space out of obligation. Some conversations happened in fragments. "I'm staying somewhere else for a while," she said one evening. I nodded. "What does that even mean?" I asked. She didn't answer. Or maybe she couldn't. I started replaying everything. Not just the last few months, but years. Moments I had stored as proof of stability. The late nights. The muted phone. The way she'd sometimes seem present but unreachable, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. I realized how many times I had protected the relationship from my own questions. How often I had chosen comfort over clarity. That was the part that haunted me. Not just what she did, but how easily I had accepted the version of reality she offered. It made me question my own judgment in a way I wasn't prepared for. Friends reacted the way people do when something doesn't fit their image of your life. She didn't seem like that. I can't believe she'd do something so calculated. Calculated. That word kept coming back. Because it wasn't an accident. It wasn't one impulsive decision. It required planning. Maintenance. Compartmentalization. It meant she had been capable of looking me in the eye while living a different truth somewhere else. For a while, I kept hoping there was some missing piece that would soften it. Some explanation that would make it less deliberate. But delayed clarity has its own cruelty. I found out details slowly, through paperwork, through timelines that became impossible to deny. The second life wasn't a short detour. It had structure. It had permanence. And I wasn't a part of it. That realization didn't bring closure. It brought a strange kind of validation. The uncomfortable confirmation that I wasn't crazy for feeling something was wrong. I had sensed the gaps. I just didn't want to name them. In the weeks that followed, I noticed how distrust seeped into everything. Not just toward her, but toward my own instincts. I started wondering how many people were living beside someone they didn't truly know. If you've ever experienced betrayal that made you question your own reality, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. And if these stories resonate with you, take a moment to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps more than you'd think. Because even now, what unsettles me most isn't what she did. It's how normal it all looked while it was happening. There's a particular kind of silence that comes after something like this. Not the silence of being alone, exactly. More like the silence of realizing the life you were living had an echo you never noticed. Some mornings, I still wake up and reach for a version of the world that doesn't exist anymore. The habits remain longer than the person does. The shape of routine lingers. I'll stand in the kitchen and catch myself waiting for a sound that won't come. A familiar step. A voice asking something ordinary. And then I remember. It wasn't just that she left. It was that she was already gone long before I knew it. That's what I keep circling back to. The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't reckless. It was quiet. Maintained. Structured. It existed alongside our shared life like a hidden room in a house I thought I knew completely. I used to think infidelity was about desire or impulse or weakness. Now I'm not so sure. Because what I saw wasn't a single mistake. It was a parallel existence. A choice repeated so many times it became its own reality. And I still don't know what's worse. Is betrayal more forgivable when it happens in a moment of recklessness? Or is it more devastating when it's built carefully, over time, with intention? When someone can look at you across a dinner table, ask about your day, fall asleep beside you, and still preserve another version of their life where you don't exist at all. That's the part that changed me. Not just losing her. Losing the certainty that closeness means honesty. Losing the assumption that sharing a space means sharing a truth. I don't tell this story because I have answers. I tell it because I think a lot of people live inside trust without realizing how fragile it is. And maybe the real question isn't whether someone can betray you. Maybe it's whether you can ever truly know the difference between someone being beside you and someone being with you. If this story made you reflect on your own experiences, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Because sometimes the most dangerous betrayals aren't the ones that explode. They're the ones that unfold quietly, right next to you.